Back to the class. We're going over an introduction to spiritual warfare here. And we're picking up with slide 13 here. All right. So we're talking about the state of the heart. And we're going to quickly go over how things get into our heart in the first place. As we mentioned in the last little module, we may think things and process them in our brain, but we have to store them somewhere, like we store them on a hard drive in a computer. So we store them in our heart. So how do things get into your heart? How do they get from your brain to your heart, if you will? Okay, well, part of it is what we look at. You can see that over in Matthew 5:28. And it says, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So that's also known as the eye gates, right? The things that you're looking at. What kind of TV are you looking at? What kind of magazines are you looking at? Are you looking at gossip columns, or are you looking at negative news? The things that you're looking at, are they full of bias? Are they neutral? Are they fair? Do they present both sides of an argument? Or do they present just one side and one angle, right? And everything that you read on the news has some level of bias in it. Just understand that. But at the end of the day, it's what are you looking at? What are you paying attention to? What kind of TV shows are you watching? Are you watching those reality TV shows that have a bunch of drama? I will tell you, I had a person that was very close to me who used to love to watch, and I'm going to leave the specific show name out of it, but it was a reality TV show. And I guess the best way we would describe the woman was very ghetto. Constantly sassing her husband, disrespecting him, cussing him out, giving him a bunch of attitude, and all of this, we'll just call it jazz, right? But she was not loving. She was not edifying her marriage. She didn't seek peace, right? She didn't seek understanding. She didn't want to hear his side. She didn't want to listen to him. She just ran over him and treated him like dirt. Well, this young lady in my life is a very close friend of mine at the time. She was constantly watching this stuff, right? And she started having more and more problems in her marriage. And so she came to me one day and I was just listening to her and I was thinking, oh my gosh, she sounds just like this lady in this TV show. Now, mind you, I'd known her for years and she hadn't really acted like that before, if you will. But all she did was watch not only this show, but these kinds of shows, right? The negative drama, the constant conflict. And so we sat down and we talked and I said, do you know who you sound like? And we had a long conversation about what she was watching on TV. So she committed to stop watching that show and the other ones that were like it, and to get back into her word, which she did. Start listening to more praise and worship music or positive messaging, whether it was talk radio or whatever, right? And as she did, her marital problems became first more manageable. Then they didn't even need to be managed. They could easily be discussed. That they got to the point that they weren't having any of those problems anymore. The further and further away she got from having watched that kind of stuff and that kind of behavior. So what we set our eyes on, what we take in, it matters. It influences us, whether we realize it or not. So another way things get into the heart is by what you dwell on. And this is what I was referencing earlier a little bit about what I like to call biblical biology. We think with the mind and store in the heart, but the Bible says that we think in our heart. We find this in a few different scriptures. I've got 4 examples here, but Genesis 6:5 in King James tells us that every imagination of the thought of his heart was only evil. It doesn't say every imagination or every thought that he had in his brain. It says in his heart, right? Matthew 9:4. Knowing their thoughts, Jesus said, "Why do you entertain evil thoughts in your hearts?" Matthew 15:19. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. Ooh, I don't want all that in there. Matthew 13 and 15. For his people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have closed, lest any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their hearts, and should be converted, and I should heal them. It doesn't say anything in here about understanding with your brain, working it out in your head, right? It's talking about their heart. But it does talk about that they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears. So guess what? That's two other ways things get into your heart. We'll talk about that here in just a second. What you listen to, aka listening with your ears. Deuteronomy 1 and 28. Whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our heart, saying, the people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven, and moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakims there. Okay. Our brethren have discouraged our heart, saying. So how did their heart get discouraged? Because they heard what someone else said. They listened to it. There's another element there. Not only did they listen to it, but they believed it, right? They entertained the thought, if you will. But by listening to them, they got discouraged. Okay? Little Bible trivia. Ooh, what are we talking about here with Deuteronomy 1 and 28? Go look that one up. All right, Deuteronomy 11 and 13. And it shall come to pass. Hello. It's going to happen. If ye shall hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God, and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul. But it says what? If ye hearken diligently. Hearken is another way of saying if you listen. Listen carefully to what I'm telling you to do. Love your Lord, serve him with all your heart and all your soul, and what you're looking for to happen is going to come to pass. It's a little rewording and paraphrasing there. But hearken diligently, not just listen carefully, right? That's how things get into your heart as well. And then finally, we have what you spend your time doing and who you spend it with. Matthew 6 and 21. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. What do you spend your time doing? How many times do you tell somebody, yeah, something's important to you, but you never actually commit time to doing it? How many of us tell our spouses that we love them and that they're important to us, but we don't actually set aside time to spend with them, undivided, put our cell phone away, turn off the TV, and be with just them and focus on them? What about our kids? What about our friends? Right? The things we spend our time on are the things that are important to us. So how much time are we spending with God and giving to God? Is he your best friend, or is he an afterthought? Or is he only available for you, or you only available for him on Sundays? Ooh. Deuteronomy 8 and 2. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years? To humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. God led them in the wilderness for 40 years. It took 40 years to get them humble and so that they could pass a test. I do not want that to be me. But he did that so that he could know what was in their heart and whether or not they would keep his commandments. Clearly, he kept giving them chances over and over again. But what were they doing during those 40 years. Murmuring and bickering, complaining, asking to go back to Egypt, to go back to slavery, right? Not following his instructions when he says, hey, only take enough to eat for a day. What do? They go out and they try to hoard stuff, so they're not listening to his instructions. They don't believe he's going to provide. He frees them from Egypt, and yet then they don't believe him when he says he's going to feed them and clothe them and take care of them. It took them 40 years to figure it out. It took 40 years to get broken out of their complaining, murmuring, bickering, whining, complaining, all that. Okay? So what are you spending your time doing? All right. We'll stop there just before we go into the next section, which is going to be talking about the state of the Spirit.